Donald Trump. I'm an American Muslim and I already carry a special ID badge. Where's yours? And there is the picture of Sergeant Tlaib Rashid's U.S. Marine Corps ID, the kind of ID that no member of the Trump family has ever had. Joining us now, former Marine Sergeant Tlaib Rashid, who tweets at Muslim Marine. Tlaib, I have to tell you, when I saw that tweet last night, I immediately sent it to the producers of this show and said, how do we get him? How do we find him? How do we get him on TV? So thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. Obviously, you were reacting to Donald Trump's comments first in an interview where he was suggesting that maybe all Muslims should be in American Muslims in a database and possibly with an ID identifying them that way. This was your reaction to that. How did it feel to have the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination saying that there should be one religious group in the United States that should be identified as that so that everyone can know who they are?
Well, first of all, Lawrence, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this opportunity. As a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Muslims who believe in the Messiah, my father, who's a missionary, raised myself and my siblings with certain American values. And one of those very important values is that loyalty to your nation is part of your faith. And so I've lived by those values. I've tried to embody those values, and as a result of those values and that specific value, I decided that the best way that I could serve my country, the United States, was to serve in the armed forces. And so having served in the armed forces, having been with brothers of all different races and colors and creeds and different faiths, hey, look, we all bleed red, white, and blue. And when you have a front-runner candidate like Donald Trump making statements that seeks to divide our society and divide our armed forces, it just hit a nerve with me, and I had to respond. So I am very honored that there's many Americans. As a matter of fact, if you can look at, with the number of retweets I've had, that there's many Americans that agree with that sentiment, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, your tweet has really flown all around the world. And of course, as we know, it should be noted that Donald Trump, when the day came in his life to decide whether to do military service during the period when we had a draft in the Vietnam War, he did everything he could possibly do to evade service in the military. So let's listen to what Donald Trump, the first statement Donald Trump made on video about this. Let's watch this and listen to this.
Should there be a database system that tracks the Muslims here in this country?
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it. But right now we have to have a border, we have to have strength, we have to have a wall, and we cannot let what's happening to this country happen.
But that's something your White House would like to implement.
Oh, I would certainly implement that. Absolutely.
With Muslims specifically, how do you actually get them registered into a database?
It would be just good management. What you have to do is good management procedures. And we can do that. That's nice.
I mean, do you go to mosques and sign these people up into the system?
Different places. You sign them up at different, but it's all about management. Our country has no management. Who's that?
Would they have to legally be in this database? Would they be there?
They have to be. They have to be.
Now, Tlaib, he's feeling the heat from this one, and so he has done the usual Donald Trump thing, simply lie and pretend that he never said what you just saw him say. He tweeted, "I didn't suggest a database, a reporter did." Now, he said, we just heard him say that of course he would implement that, absolutely. He's talked about how would you get people registered into the database. He answers that. He says you would do it through good management. That's how he would track you down, Tlaib. That's how he would track you down and get you into his database and issue you that ID. He would do it through good management.
Yeah, and that's Donald Trump for you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think what most Americans recognize and Muslims as we band together is that, look, we're going to get together and we're going to, continue into the future and continue to advance this country together. And each and every single one of us, whether we be Muslim, Christian, a Jew, all Sikh, we're all an important element of the fabric of American society. And as the leader of, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad have said over and over and over again, is that service to humanity is part of every Muslim's duty. And so in response to that, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and myself as a member, we have engaged in activities that serve our fellow Americans. We've had blood drives. We've actually collected hundreds of thousands of units of blood. We've had many peace rallies. Look, we're not going to back down. We are open to dialogue. We're open to help people understand that the Islamic faith is a peaceful one. And if a person has a disposition that is violent, or if a person has a disposition that is, hateful, they're going to act on those instincts regardless of what faith they are. So, we're here to build bridges, and I'm here to build bridges with my, fellow Americans. People like Donald Trump, I feel, sad because, they're in a position to build bridges, and instead, what they do is just divide us. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Sergeant Taib Rashid, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I have to tell you, I look at Twitter hoping to find things that I don't know, and in fact, hoping to find things for this show. And so just about 24 hours ago when I saw your tweet, I just knew I had to get you on here. So thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence. My pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up, the hacker group Anonymous reports on what they call their success in their declared cyber war against ISIS. And now tonight's last word. I began last night's program with a note to the American news media, especially TV news, about why we shouldn't call the organizer of the Paris attacks a mastermind. Mastermind glorifies this high school dropout who managed to get 129 people killed before he got himself killed. We don't call American mass murderers masterminds when they shoot and kill unarmed people in our movie theaters, in our schools, in our churches. We don't pay them that compliment. Mastermind. U.S. Army veteran Timothy McVeigh killed more people with a truck bomb in Oklahoma City than were killed in Paris, and no one granted him mastermind status. There is, in fact, no such thing as a mastermind. Mastermind is a cartoon concept, not an accurate journalistic description. The front page headline in today's New York Times used the word organizer. The Washington Post headline said leader. Both accurate journalistic descriptions. This network stopped using the word mastermind today, but most TV news continues to send the mastermind message around the world. TV news comes out of the same screen that our entertainment comes out of, and so the line between the two gets blurred sometimes. TV news writers sometimes use the language of screenwriters, in this case James Bond screenwriters, who for 2 hours at least in a movie theater need you to believe that there are masterminds out there. ISIS wants you to believe in masterminds too. ISIS wants you to believe they have masterminds in Europe and in the United States. ISIS wants you to live in fear of their masterminds and their soldiers. There's a term for what is going on here, for what's happening to TV news. It's called semantic infiltration. Semantic infiltration means getting your enemy to use your language. ISIS is winning the semantic infiltration game with TV news this week. If ISIS could hack into TV news computer systems and rewrite scripts and the graphics that you see on the bottom of the screens at CNN and the BBC and other networks, ISIS would be delighted to discover that the one word that they wouldn't want to rewrite is mastermind. That's tonight's live. French President Francois Hollande travels to Washington on Tuesday to meet with President Obama. 2 days later, President Hollande will meet with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. He is expected to urge the United States and Russia to escalate their military attacks on ISIS, which we've just heard from our last guests is exactly what ISIS is hoping will happen. Joining us now is Ambassador Wendy Sherman, a resident fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics and the former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. She was one of the American negotiators in the U.S.-Iran deal. Ambassador Sherman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What do you make of the analysis that we just heard, that ISIS wants chaos and so welcomes a heavy military response, wants to meet Americans on the battlefield in Syria and Iraq? And if that is true, how should that affect our calculations, American calculations, about how to react here?
Well, I think we have a lot of things going on here, Lawrence. Many years ago, when the Pew Global Attitudes Project first went around the world to find out how people responded to globalization, they found out that people, particularly young people, liked what they got. They liked the new foods. They liked the different kind of jobs. They liked American technology, the iPhones and everything. Cell phones were coming online. But they also found out that people were frightened of modernity, that they were afraid of losing their sense of self. And we know psychologically that young people are always looking for their identity and who they are, and they can be pulled very quickly into any kind of a movement. So I take the point about the movement, but at some level, to the American people, to the people in Paris, to the people in Lebanon, to the people in Baghdad, to the people in Nigeria, it doesn't matter because they feel their lives are at risk. They're concerned about their security. So I think we've heard from President Obama, we've heard from Secretary Kerry, we heard from Secretary Clinton today that we really have a multi-pronged strategy that we have to undertake here. It is defeating ISIL, Daesh. And how to do that? No one is suggesting massive ground troops among those three. Because massive ground troops might get that reaction if it's American troops, that in fact it probably needs to be people on the ground who are local, who are regional, who have a stake in the action. But we've also talked about taking apart the infrastructure, the way this is funded and financed, and thirdly, to help defend against this, to help Europe support and protect its borders. But I think that this issue of propaganda, of public diplomacy, of messaging is very critical. President Obama has increased that effort. Secretary Clinton talked about starting the Global Counterterrorism Fund, and really Secretary Kerry has gotten under Secretary Stengel to move forward for more efforts of public diplomacy all over the world to understand what motivates people to do these things and to try to counter-message that and find a different way to attract them to a different life in a different world. So although I think their analysis probably has some reality to it, at some level, it only takes you so far. You then have to still defeat ISIL because it is a threat. You have to untake the infrastructure, which will go on to Al-Qaeda Point 3. I agree with that. To the Boko Harams of the world, to the other cells of the world. And you have to make sure that the defenses of each of our countries is strong enough to get us through with resolve, as Secretary Clinton said today, not with fear.
Ambassador Sherman, could you give us a time frame for the strategy you just outlined?
Well, it's going to take some time. I think that we can protect ourselves better. And I think one of the things I'm sure that President Hollande and President Obama will talk about is things that we learned after 9/11. I thought that Mayor de Blasio and the police commissioner in New York were phenomenal last night, and basically saying we've learned a lot, we're going to keep you safe. Everybody should be on the alert, but we're not going to let fear take over. We're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to give in to that fear. We welcome refugees to our country. That's what the Statue of Liberty stands there and says. And so I think we've got to share what we've learned. We have to share better intelligence. So we have to help Europe because they have migration that happens over land. We've got two oceans that don't protect us completely, as we well understand, but offer us more protection. But we also have to deal with this issue of public diplomacy and messaging. Daesh is absolutely masterful at making use of the Internet, and we have to get better at it.
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and please come back. Thank you.